into the business. So I just want to clarify that. And what happened to us about 5 years ago is we started really looking at our sources of big doors, and we realized that we had to properly evaluate them. All right. So I developed this criteria basically of 5 steps that are going to help you to evaluate a large door. And they're actually really simple because that's kind of the way I am, right? I want to bring it down. I want to make it simplistic as possible. Before we get into that, I'm going to show you a video that is going to kind of set the tone for the big doors. So let me just go ahead and show this quick video, and then we'll actually get into the presentation itself. Where are we? Here we go. Go to means full screen. We're going to play.
Natural light into homes for over a century, and no Anderson products bring more of the outside in than our extensive portfolio of big doors.
It's great to be able to just open up.
Ken, you need to share your sound with the video.
Inside and outside at the same time. You're able to interact with the outdoors.
Anderson big doors are available in thousands of panel configurations, including pocketing, corners, and curves that open from left, right, or center. Add in our wide range of styles and price points, and no one makes it easier to get the big doors you want than Anderson. Anderson folding and multi-glide doors bring the outside in on a grand scale. They fit openings up to 48 feet wide and 10 feet tall to create beautiful, stately walls of light. To redefine boundaries and blur the lines between inside and out even further, Wyland's doors by Anderson are true works of art. They're completely customizable and make it possible to have huge walls of glass up to 16 feet by
Should be bottom right 3 dots. Hit the 3 dots. It's in there, Ken.
Sizes, the ability to do very large openings, larger than most other manufacturers can accomplish, really accentuates those openings and brings in that natural light and that connection to the exterior spaces.
Wyland provides the architect with a lot of flexibility. They want large openings. They can have large openings. If they want multiple pieces of glass, they can have multiple pieces of glass and pretty much achieve whatever the client's dreams are, whatever the architecture requires. If you can dream it, you literally can do it.
Okay, so I think some of you actually didn't hear all that, but that's okay. Go ahead, just get out of that.
Tonight, I'll be eating chicken tikka masala with garlic naan. Cheers.
I win again. Patrick.
That's Sir.
Okay, I gotta get out of that one.
It doesn't matter that 20 doctors have told you it's all in your head. I got news for you.
All in your gut. Cardiothoracic surgeon Stephen Gundry says he's solved.
You really have changed the way I think about what I eat. Best book I've seen. You did all this research. You were 70 pounds heavier.
You should be able to get out of this.
Stop eating. What did you start?
So I used to be 70 pounds overweight, and I was running 30 miles a week. I was going
Why
to
can't I get this
1 hour
YouTube?
every day and eating a healthy, low-fat, vegetarian diet. And no matter what I did, I couldn't. Then Dr. Gundry.
Okay, there we go. And we'll come back. There we go. Anyway, so we had a little technical issues there as far as the sound, but I think you kind of get the point that, you know, these things are big, they're massive. We're talking about large glasses, large walls full of glass, whether they're operable, inoperable, how do they move? What does the transition look like? In this next presentation, we're going to walk through all of this again, just to kind of simplify that. So I'm going to go ahead and just start this presentation and we can get going. There we go. Okay, so here we go. This is an AIA program, but if you wanted to get AIA credits, we could go ahead and provide those, but you're going to need to contact me and let me know what your AIA number is, or do you want a certificate? But for the point, or I guess for the purposes of this, it's not really geared towards that architectural community, since really most of the people here are not architects. But anyway, it does qualify for that. So To kind of get into it, you know, what are the things we're looking at? Understanding the unique design let's go back. Unique design elements, indoor, outdoor living space, modern trends of large doors, different types of doors and styles available, transition points, which I call sort of that transition from the outside to the inside, right? What do you consider when, you know, we're looking at the environmental conditions and, you know, durability concerns, performance levels and things like that. We're going to get into all that, discuss the best processes for specifying large doors in commercial and residential applications. So again, it's very comprehensive, but it does simplify things. So if we just kind of look at the historical trends, we can see that even as far back as something with Frank Lloyd Wright's Falling Waters, this was something that was popular, right? It's a lot of glass. You know, I guess back in the 60s, we call it sort of, you know, contemporary, which we still do to some extent, but it's really more of a free and open type of a space. And that's really what we're looking to accomplish. So if we're looking for large walls of glass, we have certain considerations that we need to be aware of. Also, are they operable? Do they move? And how do they move? What's the functionality of them? So we start looking a little bit further at, you know, what are the door trends, right? So we're seeing that people are looking at these types of opportunities saying these things are readily available. They're within our budgets. Can we incorporate them into our design? We love our view. We want to bring that inside. We want that really that open feeling, right? When we do that also, we've got to think about what is our real reality of the functionality of it and what is the budget going to hold for these types of things. So when we start talking about it, and this is where it kind of gets a little bit, starts to get confusing because I hear this all the time. It's like, oh, I want like an accordion door. I mean, so you want like a folding door? Or they say bifolding and they actually mean biparting, right? So biparting means that it splits in the middle. It's not a folding unit. And again, there's different advantages and or maybe possibly disadvantages depending upon your application. So we have gliding and sliding doors. So those are the old school sliding doors, right? They're on trolleys, so those big panels slide, and they're on trolleys basically, and all that weight is sitting right on the floor, okay? And then we have the multi-slide or multi-glide, same type of a trolley system, again, load-bearing being on the floor on a track, but we have multiple panels that can move, and we're gonna illustrate that. Then we have the lift and slide, different types of hardware, which actually picks the panel up. Then we have our standard hinged and swinging doors. Then we have our folding or bifolding, and then we have pivots. So, as I mentioned before, you know, this was something that was very popular years ago. I think we all probably lived in a house or knew somebody that had a sliding patio door that was probably made out of metal. Over time, it didn't work well. Things got stuck in the tracks and, you know, the wheels didn't hold up well. Again, this was like sort of older generation type stuff. They just didn't have the technology back then, whether it was the finishes on the frames and the panels themselves or the type of hardware, it just wasn't durable, right? So now all that's changed. We have much better finishes. We have much better trolley or rolling types of systems. So they're very durable. The finishes hold up. They've got, you know, great warranties on them, some up to excess of 20 years. And different glass type options. We didn't really have the glass options before, right? So, but these were developed for mass production, and that's why they were kind of like cheap. So nowadays it's different, right? And we're developing these to be very durable, to be more performance oriented. Then we talked about, and you can see this picture on the right, you can see all the panels that basically have stacked to one side. Okay, so this is a type of a multi-slide, multi-glide panel door. And again, it's sitting on that same sort of a trolley system, right? So basically we've just incorporated additional panels so that we can open up more space and it can slide to one side. The other thing that you want to be thinking about here is like a lot of people say, gee, I just want that to go away completely. Well, yeah, you could build that into the wall system so it actually will pocket into the wall. But that's something that's done on site. That's not something that the manufacturer provides. And typically when that happens, you'll see that last panel on the end there is just a stationary panel. Well, instead of that stationary panel being out, we basically will add an additional stationary panel and that will sit behind the wall. Another consideration here is the depth of your jamb. You notice here with increasing number of panels, that increases your jamb depth too. So we've got to account for that when we're setting up the structure. It could always be an afterthought, but then we're moving the wall out. So we're bumping that wall. I mean, some of these things can get up to, 18 inches, 2 feet, depending upon how many panels are actually going to stack to one side. Also, I just want to bring up the fact that, so what is the material used here? So typically when somebody says, gee, I want something with narrow stiles and rails, I'm going to probably be looking at more of a metal door, an aluminum door, than I am, let's say, a wood door that's possibly clad in aluminum or vinyl. But there are some manufacturers, depending upon the size of the panel, we can get it basically a wood substrate, and then it'll be capped or coated with either an extruded piece of aluminum, possibly vinyl, possibly just a really great paint finish, depending upon what your needs are and what fits in with the rest of your project. But I did want to bring that up, that they are made in different types of materials, okay? The lift inside I talked about a little bit before, and basically when we talked about sort of that whole panel sliding, they're on just wheels, they're on trolleys on the bottoms of those panels, right? The lift inside is basically a very unique hardware that by rotating the handle set, it actually pushes the panel up off the floor. So the panel is basically in its closed position, it's sealed, it's a weather-tight seal on the floor system itself, which provides great performance as far as water and air intrusion. We really don't have those issues with those types of doors. If you remember the old doors, the old sliding doors that didn't work well, you'd get air blown through, occasionally water would build up in those channels. Don't have those problems anymore, and especially if we go to a lift and slide type of a system, not only does it seal better, but also because of the way those panels actually pick up off the floor, we've got some weight that's being suspended into the ceiling, so we have to have a substantial header, not a lot, but some. And basically, it's a lot easier to operate because now we're moving it off that surface and it has multiple trolleys that are moving this thing along. So especially when we're talking about larger doors or larger panels, you know, some of these panels can get up in excess of 500 pounds a piece just because of the size of glass that's in there. So we start talking about bigger doors, going with the trolley system many times won't work well because it's so heavy to push, right? Again, the lift inside allows it, it's more expensive. It was introduced years ago, something sort of a European type hardware, and now it's kind of readily available and pretty much everybody carries a lift and slide patio door. My suggestion is if you're not familiar with it, you want to go to a showroom where you can find a regular sliding patio door and then a lift and slide, and you'll have a complete appreciation and understanding of really what a lift and slide does, right? Some of your options too, when we start talking about lift and slides, we can actually have larger units. Like I talked about, the panels can be bigger. Well, if the panels can be bigger, the whole system can be larger, okay? One manufacturer that we deal with has a height restriction of 16 feet and goes to 60 feet wide, okay? I do have other manufacturers that have gone to 21 feet tall and almost unlimited in width. Now, obviously, when we start talking about those types of things, the cost continues to rise, right? Bigger units, more glass, heavier hardware. So again, that's gonna reflect in the cost. I've always said that in fenestration, the cost of the product, the end cost to the consumer is always a direct reflection of the manufacturing cost, right? It's overhead, it's parts, it's trucking. All these things are factors in it. I do window business with one window company in particular, and we're always saying, hey, I need a better price. You're just not as competitive as we like you to be. And then I went to their factory and I evaluated their manufacturing process. And what I realized was that they have all these great craftsmen that have been there for years, 30 years. It was like, oh yeah, we got great guys, we keep them forever. Well, guess what? Those are really expensive people. Yeah, those are the guys I want building my products because I want a quality product. But also I'm understanding why that price is higher, or overhead's higher, okay? So again, these costs are not inflated typically. It's more directly reflected to manufacturing itself, okay? Here's another part about your lift and slides is that with many of them, we can get what we call sort of a zero clearance track. So these tracks you see, those stripes on the floor are actually the tracks themselves. That sill system or track system is actually built into the floor. So the way that comes is the track is open and then your flooring guy is going to basically insert pieces of the floor itself in between the tracks. And what does that give you? One of my clear, really important criteria is what is that transition? I love that big opening. I love that big door, but you know what? I don't want to be tripping over it, okay? And if I'm going to bring the outside in, I want to have that same sort of a texture or some continuity going in and out. So very important, the sill system. So I'm evaluating these large door systems. The track is extremely important. Yeah, something buried into the floor. How does the water get out? Water's got to get in there. There's got to be some sort of a weeping system or a drainage system. So another consideration, I've seen these tracks from certain manufacturers, and I know for a fact they leak, and because they don't have a drainage system. And what they tell you then is that, well, it requires a minimum of an 8-foot overhang. Okay, well, that's fine. But what if I can't do an 8-foot overhang? Well, I'm going to have to spend more money for a different type of track, or I'm going to have to sort of give up on that a little bit, maybe get a track that's a little bit higher. But one of the big considerations anytime we're looking at these doors is an overhang required, okay? Because typically if I'm letting the outside in, is it going into a porch or is it going directly out into a patio? Big consideration when we're working on these things. And I think these are things that we need to work out with the client ahead of time as well. Okay, so your hinge doors. We all are very familiar with hinge doors, you know, right back to the day of the old French doors that, you know, didn't operate well, were painted shut. And now we've got multi-point hardware. We've got great interlocking astracals or weather stripping systems. The door in the picture here is what I call actually a terrace door because it's hinged off a stationary panel. So it's not a true French. The thing I like about this particular door is that it's much more weather tight than a French door is going to be. French doors can be a little problematic. People don't know how they operate. They don't lock them properly, head and foot bolt type of a thing. With here, it's a very simple system. Anybody can do it. It's just another option. It's something to be thinking about. Also, in-swing, outswing. That's another thing. We do a fair amount of work on the shore. And actually, I live down on the Delaware Beach. And you know, everything down there, I mean, we don't even think about an in-swing door down there. It's got to be an outswing because, again, the weather is just so severe. It doesn't have to be a direct waterfront application, though. You could be up on a hilltop. You could be in an area that's exposed to a lot of weather, even flat terrain. You know, that wind just picks up. There's nothing to block it. So another consideration is how's this going to perform over time and the weather stripping involved. So here it goes back to my original statement about, you know, the accordion door. I want an accordion door. I want a folding door. I want a bifolding door. Okay, bi means two. So that's two panels are going to fold. So if I've got multiple panels folding, can't be a bifold, but it is a type of folding door unit. First consideration with this is it panels going to fold out or are they going to fold into the house, into the structure? And you can get them both ways. And some manufacturers only do it one way, something to consider. So I may be eating up precious real estate from my exterior patio by having them fold out. But if it's folding in, is it taking away from maybe that sitting room that's right in front of this great big door, right? Another consideration. One thing to think about is, or do I get it with a pivot? So it's basically that space is shared between the inside and outside. That's something I do a lot with restaurants, you know, because they don't want to take a lot of cafe space on the exterior. They don't want to take any indoor dining away. So a pivot door is really a great solution for these types of applications where the sliding panel doesn't work well. We need it to kind of go away. We can't pocket it into the wall. So again, a folding system will work well. Another consideration is the manual door. If you notice in this picture here, that manual or single door is hinged off of one of the folding panels. That is not available with every manufacturer. A lot of manufacturers only have that manual door hinged off the jamb itself. So something else to be thinking about is because that door is going to get used a lot more than you actually sliding that door or folding it all the way. So something to consider with that too. Also, there's some manufacturers when we do, let's say a bi-parting folding unit, so it's basically splitting or opening in the middle, do you have access from the exterior to do that? Because some manufacturers don't. They say, no, if you got to put a manual panel in, it has to be off the jamb. So again, just another consideration, we're talking about folding doors, right? Pivot doors, we talked about this a little bit. You know, you can see here it's basically offset, right? So that door is going to be offset. Part of it's going to encroach on one of the spaces, whether interior or exterior. It's really a cool look. It's really a nice design. The key there with folding doors or with pivot doors is the sill system. If it doesn't have an overhang on it, you want to make sure you've got a really good sill system. Okay, so it's one of the things when I'm evaluating pivot doors, I'm always looking at how does your sill system work? Because basically they're incongruent of each other, right? They're basically fighting each other. One is going to seal one way, the other one's going to seal the other way. Typically some sort of an interlock system works best, but I have seen a few that are really good without the interlock and great, really high performance rating. So it's a great look, great functionality, but some things to consider with that. So basically we have been talking about some of the issues that pertain to what these, when evaluating these units, what to be looking for. So we've got design. You know, what's the look that we want? Narrow stiles and rails, maybe a little bit beefier. I want really big panels. So if I'm thinking about really big panels, then I have to have very substantial frame parts. If I can't get the panels as big as I want, then I've got more panels, and how are they spaced out? I'm thinking about enclosing my back porch, let's just say, for example, and I've got, basically, I know I've got posts. I don't have a stud wall because it's a screened-in porch, so I've got posts. How do I structurally fit in folding or sliding door units in there and still maintain my structural integrity? Because in some places, there's got to be a post. So it's something to consider, right? How does that really work, and how does that work well? So I'm getting the look that I want, yet I'm maintaining that structural integrity that I need to keep it going, right? And then we always got to look at thermal performance. We have big pieces of glass, as I mentioned before. You've got a lot of UV exposure, which leads to UV degradation. So one of the things I've been thinking about is if I've got a lot of sunlight coming into this large glass area, then I need to make sure that I've got the proper low emissivity coatings on that glass so that it's bouncing those UV rays out, right? I get calls on a pretty regular basis where people say, gee, we got this 10 years ago and it's a great room with tons of glass, but we're just getting cooked inside our house. We're blowing up our AC bills. We don't know what to do. Yeah, one of the options is putting a film on it. Another option would be putting some sort of a screen system on it. But the best option would be, let's plan ahead, right? Let's figure that out before we get into that mess where it's like now I'm, you know, killing myself with my HVAC system because the loads are different. And that's something, especially when we're building it, it's new construction or it's extreme renovation, what I call a gut and redo, that we're looking and we're consulting with our HVAC engineers to make sure that the proper loads are being calculated for these large glass systems. So we've got design, which is the look. We've got functionality. How do we want it to work? Is it sliding? Is it stacking? Is it folding? All those different components. Also, we want to think about the transition. That's extremely big, right? How does that transition from in to out and vice versa? What are the structural issues? If I've got a folding system, for example, many of those folding systems are top loaded. They're not bottom loaded. And that's very important to understand because if it's top loaded, then I may have to make sure that that header is going to carry whatever that load is going to be, right? Good example, I did a pool cabana a couple years ago out on the Eastern Shore. Cabana being, you know, structurally basically inept, and it had to be bottom loaded. So I had to find a company that made a bottom loaded door. It had to be a folding door. It had to fold a certain way. They wanted openings on either end. So it was kind of complicated. But the reality was, I looked at it and I said, well, not only is your cabana not structurally adequate in the header, but also on the floor. Basically, it was sitting on a deck. Long story short, we talked to some engineering people and it was determined they needed to build a small concrete wall that went underneath the sill just to carry the load. I knew for a fact that these doors they can be temperamental. And if they start to bend, if we find bows and whatnot, they won't work right. Anything over, let's say, 1/8, maybe 1/4 inch at the very most, out of square or racked or plumb, they won't operate well. And that's a sad thing. So again, something to evaluate when we're looking at these types of things. And then budget. Yeah, I can get you all the bells and whistles. I can get it to do whatever you want it to do, but it costs so much, right? And many times it's like, oh, I didn't realize it was that much. The good news is that we can start eliminating options and bring that door back into a more reasonable price range that will help with your budget apex. So just something to be thinking about. Obviously, view is extremely important. You can see here how that track system is just built right in the floor. I mean, they open up that wall. It's pocketing into the other wall, the door sliding door system. It is a lift and slide. And basically, their living room and their pool are now in the same room, right? I mean, how cool is that? But you know, this is sort of the top of the line, right? I've got to pocket it, so I had to build that wall. That wall's got to be close to 2 feet wide because it's got to accommodate this track system and all those panels. And that's not a problem, but again, we need to incorporate that into the initial design. Great view. What about the hardware? We haven't even mentioned hardware yet. And hardware is another one of those things where window and door manufacturers manufacture windows and doors. They don't manufacture hardware. So they offer certain standards, but many times we can go to a third-party architectural hardware supply company to get different handles and locking mechanisms, okay? So it's one of the things that's like, gee, okay, I really want that door, but I really don't like that handle. I want it to look something else. Maybe I want it to look like a tree branch or a fish or something, whatever, right? Those are available, but we need to check that ahead of time. Let's not wait to the end and say, oh, I don't really like that handle, so can I get one that looks like a branch? I'd hate to have the answer be no. So something to consider as well. You know, we talk a lot about functional considerations. I won't waste a lot of time here, but one of the things that occurs in many times, and I get this a lot, is like, well, my aging parents live with us, or they're moving in, or it's a, you know, it's sort of an ensuite kind of a thing where they've got a place inside of our house, or it's a little building or whatever. You're talking about big pieces of glass, you really need that lift and slide type of a system, or a system that's going to operate easily, okay? Because there are physical considerations. You're not always going to be able to push this, you know, 500 to, in this case here, in this picture, that panel's got to weigh in excess of 1,000 pounds. And you're not going to operate that if it's on a sliding system, nor don't think you'll find anybody to make it for you. It's always going to be a lift and slide, but I think it's an important investment if we're going to do that, to get it right. Structural considerations, we've already kind of discussed this. Here's always kind of cool though, and we have a display of one of these in our Silver Spring showroom of a corner unit, right? So basically it closes up the whole corner of the house, and when it opens, and in this particular application, it's pocketing right into the wall system. So you even see it. It's like somebody just took a chunk out of the corner of the house, and it's just wide open to the exterior, which is great. We've got structural considerations there. What about overhang? That's another issue here, right? Depending upon the door, depending upon the sill system, we might have those challenges. So just something to think about. Oh, screens too. So it says here, exposure to elements. When I start talking about elements, I start thinking about screens. A lot of these doors are manufactured on the West Coast or in the Southwest. That's one thing they don't have there that we have here is bugs, right? And so is there a screen system for it? I've seen this so many times where people say, oh, I love that door. And then it gets in and it's like, I got bugs all over my house. What do I do, right? Or I had another client who said, well, I don't want a screen on it at all. I'm not worried about the bugs or whatever. And then I had to remind him, I said, but you told me that you're moving in 5 years because your contract ends with your current employer and you're already planning on going somewhere else. I said, when you go to sell this house without a screen on that door, that might be a problem. Okay, so get the screen system. And you can keep it in its closed position or open position all the time, so it's stored. And a lot of these things are retractable and they can sit off to the side and nobody really notices them. But again, it's just another consideration when we're thinking about these things. Thermal performance, I already mentioned this. We need to make sure that we've got the proper coatings on the glass itself, or you're going to get an awful lot of light. You're going to get an awful lot of UV degradation. Your solar heat gain coefficient needs to really be as low as possible to protect not only the items inside your house, but to make sure that your loads in your HVAC system are operating properly to heat and cool the structure, because you do have all of this UV coming in, right? Extreme weather events, we're talking mostly about storms, right? Many times I look at things and I say, gee, do we have the potential for flying debris? And I know that's sort of an odd conversation with people because I don't really think about that. It's like, what are you talking about? It's like, is Dorothy and Toto going to come flying through my window or something? It's like, no. But hurricanes, they occur all over the place, right? Occasionally tornadoes. we do get that. And remember, with large pieces of glass, they're very susceptible. It's not just a log bumping up against your house, it's hitting a piece of glass now. All doors by law have to be tempered, which helps. But if we're really concerned about it, my suggestion would be to go to laminated glass, right? Greater security, greater sound transmission, deadening, okay? And then obviously we don't have the breaking issues. And if it does break, it's not going through and it's not coming into my house, hopefully, okay? But something to think about. Obviously we have building codes that we have to satisfy, but to me, that's kind of at the low end of consideration because we're probably gonna build in excess of what that code requires, unless you're in Montgomery County. That could be a problem. I didn't say anything. Anyway, so we can see here that obviously that your performances are rated, and they're rated by certain agencies, okay, that are sort of unbiased third-party agencies that basically have evaluated that product and they've given it a rating, whether it's some sort of a design pressure rating or whatever. And again, we've got different things. We check for U factor, we check for solar heat gain coefficients. And for those of you who don't understand solar heat gain, so it's basically indicates the amount of heat transferred into the home. Okay, so a high rating collects more heat, low rating blocks the heat, right? And we won't get into U and R value. We already talked a little bit about sound deadening and sound attenuation, as they call it here. Again, when we're doing this more in, let's say, urban areas where we're closer to a street, an airport, whatever it might be, we want to keep that sound down. Laminated glass is always a great way to go for deadening that sound to really a tremendous degree. It's not gonna be perfect, nothing's perfect. But again, that's, to me, it's the way to go. If we're thinking about that, thinking about sound, then laminated glass is really the way to go with that. We already talked about sort of wind-driven rain, impact resistance. Again, laminated glass would be the answer to that. That's basically what you see here in this picture. So we're just going to go and look at some examples of projects and kind of give us an idea of what some of these things look like and obviously their applications. So, you know, here, larger sliding systems that just open up a whole wall. This happens to be a restaurant, a brewery. Here's another thing to consider though too, is that a lot of times when these are in either commercial application or residential, and it happens more in commercial, but the people there that are operating things, they don't know how these things work. So I see this a lot. I got called to a restaurant just outside of Annapolis, and they said, gee, we had this folding door system in here, but it's probably just a crappy manufacturer. It wasn't the manufacturer. It was the employees. They didn't know how to operate it, so they were forcing it constantly. And it was a folding door system. So folding doors can be a little more problematic than sliding doors can. And that's not a deal breaker. It's just you have to understand how they function, right? You can't force them. The proper hardware has to be unlocked for you to operate those panels properly. If not, you're forcing things, you're breaking things. Same thing happens with multi-point hardware, quite frankly. We get that a lot where people they break it. They don't know how it works, right? So consideration, same thing in residential. It may not be a restaurant where the employees don't know what they're doing. It could be, you know, kids. It could be relatives. It could be whatever. They just don't understand how it operates and they can break it. So it's one of those things that I do look at and say, is this thing easy to operate? And again, just having that knowledge is a big help. Here's another one picture that just shows that seamless sill system. You know, again, they needed something that you can see it's got a slight slope on it here, but they wanted it dead. They just that sort of a, you know, flatness. They don't want any activity as far as sticking up. So those tracks actually stick up not even 3/8 of an inch off the surface of the floor. All right, so again, very zero sort of clearance on it. Here's a residential application here. And again, in fitting in the architecture with everything else, you know, hey, we've got as we mentioned before, we've got a living room that's basically got a pool in it, right? Or we've got a pool that's got a nice little room inside for us to go in and maybe get out of the sun or the rain or whatever. But again, it opens up the outside. And I think that's another point is how is that going to match the architectural integrity of the existing structure? Doors are different. Windows should all match. Doors can almost be a focal point if we want them to be, okay? it's absolutely architecturally correct to have a door look different than the windows. Think about a front door. Front doors typically don't look like the windows. So we can do it either way. But again, different manufacturers offer different things. So it's something that we want to think about. So here was just a retrofit. The folding door was the best option. Why? Because it's a retrofit. I can't build a pocketed wall system in here. I just got nowhere for it to go. So with a folding system, this one was chosen to fold to the interior, and it's going to stack all up against one wall. Okay, it's out of the way. And we can still enjoy that great space in a retrofit type of application. And again, these things can split. They can all go one way or the other. They can fold in, they can fold out. Depends on the manufacturer, what we're looking to do. These next few slides are house in Florida, so it's not really applicable for here. But it does show you that you can really do a lot of things with these doors. 52-foot opening, 12-foot tall door. It was hurricane prone, so it's in Florida, so it's going to be, you know, Miami-Dade County Code, which is extremely stringent. And that's what you have to remember there. So I like doors when they say, oh yeah, this passes Miami-Dade Code. There's actually not a lot of door companies that do that. And actually, the reality is I've looked at big folding and sliding door systems that weren't even rated. So that's another thing that you want to be looking at is this thing rated? And what to rate it to what code standards, right? So yeah, this is, I think this is Angela's house. I'm not sure, but it's nice. She never invited me over, probably because this is her house. So we'll kind of move on from there. I like this picture here, so I'm just gonna go back here to show you Angela's house. I think that screen pops right out of that cabinet there too. Here's probably, you know, another application here where, again, just great views. And I know when these panels all in their open position, they're basically all gonna pocket someplace else. And you're just left with this big flat terrace, which I think is pretty incredible. Anyway, this concludes the learning portion of this presentation. If there's any questions, you can unmute yourself and we can chat about that now, or you can contact me directly. And I'm sure we've got my contact information someplace. I'm not that hard to find. And we can answer any questions. We can look at projects. We can look at options and things like that. And I get that a lot nowadays because a lot of architects, especially, don't really even understand big doors. And they're looking at things and they don't, it's not something that they were schooled in. And it's not really a new thing, but it is something that you really have to take time and just evaluate what you want to do, how it's going to work, what's the look, what's the transition, what are the performance needs, what are the structural requirements, and then how does that fit into the budget? So again, we've tried to simplify it with, you know, just really those 5 key factors. And I think that'll make your life a lot easier. It did for me. So now I can walk into any big door manufacturer and I look for those things in particular. How do they work? And again, big ranges of things. I talked about this from, you know, just a large expanse, huge heights. And what about motorization? You know, hey, maybe I just want to push a button. Maybe I don't even worry about lift and slide and pushing a door and all that. How about pushing a button? We can do that too. So again, these are all great considerations, and that's really all I have for you today. So I'm going to ask for Debbie to kind of take it away, and I will do the stop share. So I'm no longer sharing, and Debbie jumps in.